Hello again. Just been reading up on one of my favourite fish, some old bugs, going through them, and that is the lady of the stream, the Grayling, which I've done a bit of fishing for recently on my local river Ribble, amongst some of the Yorkshire rivers too. Difficult to describe how pretty it is. It's very apt title, the Lady of the Stream. Very feminine, sort of graceful look about it, and you've got colours depending on the angle of light that you hold the fish up to. You'll see white, silver, pewter, pearl, sort of vermilion, aubergine, purplish colours. Certainly on the back, and certainly darker, sort of grey and. Sort of metallic look to the larger fish. Absolutely stunning. They are related to the salmon and trout, as you can see by the adipose fin and that telltale slight sort of subtle spotting about the flanks. But attitudes have changed, and a lot of fly fishermen really appreciate the Grayling. Likewise, the coarse fisherman, it tends to be overlooked a little bit. It sits in the sort of fast, shallow water, not like the deeper barbel and chub streams. So again, to an extent, the coarse fishermen tend to overlook the Grayling, but it's certainly got a band of devotees that really appreciate it. Right, so if we've decided we want to catch a Grayling from one of these beautiful northern rivers, first thing we need to do is find them, and location is really 95% of the problem in winter. Once you've found them, they're not that difficult to catch, assuming you don't make too much noise about it and use a reasonable amount of stealth and watercraft. Now, what I look for is rough rapids leading into deeper runs. Maybe 5-6 feet on a big river. That's up to 2 metres in modern language. On a big river like this. Now, the same location on smaller rivers I look for, but realistically that's more like 4 to 5 feet in depth. And sometimes you can find them in quite shallow water in winter, even down to like 2 feet deep. So it's a good thing to search all areas. This is what I like about using the stick float and trotting tackle, because it allows you to search a lot of water. You only have a few runs through in each stretch and then move on until you've found a shoal. Now, like I say, once they're found, they're not usually too difficult to catch. Like I say, if you're roving and travelling light, an Avon float, 4-pound line. I like to use a long rod, 15 feet, maybe even longer, be quite handy on big rivers like the Ribble or the Eden or the Welsh Dee, or some of the bigger Yorkshire rivers like the Wharfe. A long rod gives you a lot of control. Having said that, you can manage quite well with a 12-footer. So yeah, like I say, 4-pound line, centre pin or fixed spool reel, or I prefer centre pin myself. Avon float, and maybe 3 pound for the bottom. You can go a bit finer if it's very clear and they're being very finicky. Shot the float down so that you can see a reasonable amount of it in the rough water, but it's not too difficult to pull under. That's a bit of a balancing act that you can only achieve with trial and error. And I like to bulk the shot about maybe 2/3 of the way down towards the hook, maybe with, in this case, 3 BBs, and then some other shot spread between that and the float, and a little tiny shot, maybe a size 6 or something like that, on the hook length, just above the hook. That way, when you're running your float through, you can hold back slightly and that bait will travel in front of the float. Remember that the water in a river always flows a little bit slower underneath. What you're looking at on the surface is flowing faster than where the fish are lying. So what appears to be very fast water can be quite a moderate pace underneath. So if you're holding your float back, everything's balanced and your float's not sort of getting in front and dragging the bait along, which obviously to the fish looks unnatural. Now, the other method apart from float fishing is deep nymph fishing. There are some experts that can do this very well. I'm not one of them. I've had a few grayling on deep nymph, but it tends to be on the smaller rivers, which you're fishing a little bit shallower and with a less fierce current. On a big river like the Ribble or the Eden, it really takes some skill to get those flies deep enough to search the areas where the grayling are feeding. Now baits, you can use maggots. Grayling love them, and it's very handy loose feeding a few maggots in before you start, just to get them feeding. And if that's the case, maybe a 16 or an 18 hoop for a double maggot, maybe a 20 for a single. To be honest, I've used worm and maggot. I've used worm when I've forgotten my maggots, and I think it's just as effective. In fact, if anything, it may give you an edge with the bigger fish, and obviously a lot cheaper. What I do is make a worm bomb, which involves chopping a few worms up or breaking them up into small pieces, looking for a bit of molehill soil, which is all too common on riverbanks. Make that into a sort of cricket ball tight ball of mud with the worms bedded into it, and basically throw it into the head of the run that you intend to fish, and it'll put a tiny bit of colour into the water and a few free bait offerings just to get them, get them woken up. Quite often it's not necessary. The fish will find your bait and can be persuaded to feed quite easily. Size 12 barbless hook for worm, by the way. One thing you will notice with grayling is just how hard they can fight once they get that dorsal fin up and start kiting in the current. Quite incredible, really. They always feel like a much bigger fish. Something staying quite deep. Not giving too much away at the moment. That's all. If it's a grayling, it's a hell of a good one, I think. Got a chop here. I fancy it's a chop. Still not showing itself. But I reckon it's a chub. No, it's a grayling. It's a belter. It's a good one. Good grayling. Heavens, yeah. He does not want to come in. At all. Got to be a bit careful because I'm on 2.8. This is a good fish. They're in prime condition, top fighting form at this time of the year. What a fight! What a fight! Oh, we got him! Yeah, absolute belter. belter. Might even be weighing this one, I think. Oh, look at this for a lady. Although I think he might... And what about this, guys? Lady of the stream. Absolute cracker. Look at that. That has absolutely made my January. Fantastic. Let's get her back. Off you go, my darling. And the technique I'm using, just cast the float more or less square out from where you are, searching the near water first, and let the float drift, hold back slightly so the bait's in front of the float like we discussed earlier, and let it run down the swim until the float gets a bit difficult to see. Bring it back, try a little bit further out, and once you're confident that you've searched that area, maybe wade down another 10-15 metres and try the bit below that. And this way, in maybe half an hour or so, you can cover a run of maybe 50-60 yards long. Confident that you've tried all the available water. I like cold weather and a clear river. You can be caught in the margins in flood water, but it's not quite the same sport. More chuck it and chance it, really. And season wise, best from November to January. Sometime during February they start getting a little bit more difficult to catch as they think about spawning and getting into the spawning mode. Difficult to say when that happens. A lot depends on the weather. Might be quite early this year because it's been so mild. But if we get a cold snap at the end of February, we might get a bit of an extension to the season. Oh, he's in the net. Now, handling and care of grayling. That's a nice one. Try to keep them in the water, and if you have to take them out of the water, wet your hands and always use barbless hooks. They can be very wriggly and awkward to handle, unlike trout. Now, a little trick I've tried now and again, and it does seem to work usually, is to hold them upside down briefly and then tilt them up the right way up, and they tend to calm down a little bit. Just gives you that opportunity to get the hook out and maybe hold them up for a few seconds for a photograph. Don't keep them out of the water too long. If you're struggling to get the hook back and you want to photograph, put them back in the net for half a minute, let them get the breath back. And when you do return them, gently slip them back, don't throw them back in. And when you're using barbless hooks, you will lose a few in play, but it's still sport, and it's better than taking too long to unhook a fish, or worse still, having them swallow the hook and you can't get the hook out. So, I hope I've prompted you to give this a go. Belting sport in the winter. I really would struggle to not have a few grayling sessions over the deep winter months. And if you've enjoyed the content and enjoyed the video, please don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and what else? No, that's it. Okay, until next time, tight lines and good luck.